For today's session, may I invite the chair, Dr. R. Nagaraj, to chair this session. Thank you very much.
Good morning. So this is the final day for session. We have 1 hour and 45 minutes and 2 papers. So we have ample time. That's so that's very good. So we'll have a productive session. So now, conventionally we keep it as let's keep it half an hour each, so that, right? Half an hour each. Okay, so each presenter gets half an hour each. Then, as per our regular rule, I'll show the flag 5 minutes before. Okay, then 1 minute before. Okay, so now may I invite Bheemeshwar Reddy to present his paper. The title of his presentation: Work, Welfare and Security, Aging and Economic Survival in India. So half an hour for you. No, this is the allocated time for you.
Then I have to talk about something else. Thank you everyone for being for this on time, and then and thank FAS for asking me to write on old age. Though I've done some work earlier on old age and especially old age employment and social security. But I was thinking of updating it, but I wanted to do more work, but which I couldn't do it to various reasons. But then I've actually updated some of the things that I've done earlier, and then I'm going to make a very simple point here. Basically, what I'm going to argue is that actually now that India is going to rapidly age, and we're going to age before we become very rich. Unlike if you look at the trajectories of the Western countries, it took almost 200 years for them to reach the old age levels that we have today in India, whether it's France, and you talk about most of the Western countries. But actually, both in the case of India and China, this aging is happening much faster rate. Before that's happening, unfortunately, at the time when our overall per capita incomes are not increasing at the same pace, or they're supposed to increase at much higher pace. But then that's not happening, and this is going to be a major challenge. Already the state in which we are in, it has a very high proportion of old age population, and also a typical dependence. Even if you look at it, typical dependency ratio as well. However crudely it is calculated or refined version, whatever you want to think about it, it's very high. And there's a huge reason which I'm going to talk about. So that is what motivates us to think about it more seriously than till now, because till now the proportion of the population in the older people, whom here I mean by older people is 60 and above. That's how the government of India, different state governments categorize. There are some variations. So there's not much attention has been paid. The one classical example of that, which I'll be talking again in detail, is that our old age pension for last almost for 30 years has stuck as part of national old age pension, which is used to be called Indira Gandhi old national old age pension scheme, only 200 rupees. The center's contribution has remained at 200, and that shows that how much attention the government has paid. It is not even indexed to any kind of index. Forget about the index that is decent, but it's not even anything. It's been just constant there, and it proudly writes that it's contributing 200. But then this morning I'm reading one of the PIB's press bureau information thing. It says state compliments it, tops it up. So this is again interesting because there's enough time in talking extempore and about the issues that Professor Nagaraj is here and others who are experts in public finance and fiscal state of India. The thing is, there's an increasing burden on the state, and then you are pushing more and more states to spend from their pockets. But that's like so basically the point is that there's not enough attention has been paid, and And the entire discourse internationally has been this, that actually both in the Western countries, because the shrinking of population due to the low fertility level, both in some of the East Asian countries, as well as like Japan, Korea, as well as in the Western countries, because their population, the productive age population is shrinking because of low fertility levels. The point that they, the international discourse is on active aging or productive aging, which means essentially that actually you increase the number of years of age or for retirement in formal sector, or you ask people till they work, till the point they can work, you ask them to work. But that's actually problematic, as we would see that actually most of the people, and just a review that has come out in annual review of public health, which is actually talks about what, when we talk about this, physical, even if you were thinking about in the people, those who are not in the old age, even in the age, the productive age groups, that the one thing that has been omitted from the entire discussion in this area is that actually the requirement of physical, though, because you say that you have to physically active to avoid diseases, to do this thing, but actually that paper points out from the most of the LMICs, including India, there's a rough estimation which is actually should be much higher. They says that 68% of the people any work in very work intensive environment are they read physically very burdensome occupations. And then you would we will also, so that is the thing. So you work for 60 years or 40 years. Most of the people, at least in this cohort, would have worked for at least for 40 years, more bulk of them. And then you expect them to carry on that, if you are an agricultural worker or a manual worker or in a regular worker as a watchman or the person who is security personnel, you work for 40 years that activity in that activity, and then you expect that person to carry out that hard physical labor even when you are in 60. So that is what is actually this entire discourse on active aging and productive aging, silver dividend, all of this, what it misses is bulk of our labor force is as if today, forget about the previous cohorts, which is much higher, for the previous cohorts is much higher, who are the old now, but it is almost 90% of the people are doing some kind of hard labor. So in that context, it is to live a dignified life, you need to give a choice. But as if now in the policy discourse internationally and in India as well, that we should make people, we should create opportunities, we should make people work. That has been the idea. And so basically that actually what this thing misses out is that there is no need of giving choice. They don't talk about giving choice to people. I'm not going to make the argument that actually everybody is working out of compulsion here. Somebody might be, bulk of the people, as we could see from the several presentations here and from the Sophie, I mean, of course not recent one, the previous one, and the different international indices come out from different international agencies which have some validity, show that how bad is the situation in terms of poverty, in terms of the healthy diet that they require. All of that, we see that actually it portrays that most of the people are not living a decent life. And then you are not giving, so basically by saying that you work till age, are taking this recourse to these policy discourses of active aging or productive aging, you are actually denying them the choice. So people, those are well-to-do, they might actually exercise that option out of choice, but most of the people, it is not the choice. That's the point. So in that context, I would argue that actually there is a need for a universal pension with a decent amount, as pension Parishad were long demanding that at least the pension amount that you get, social pension, that make it universal first. And second thing is, they were arguing that at least pitch it at the half of the minimum wage. Suppose if the minimum wage is 300 rupees per day, so whatever you multiplied with 30 to 9,000, at least give 4,500 or 5,000 rupees as the minimum, as the pension, social pension, which would actually bring down dependency and gives them some dignified life and gives them option to exercise that choice, because there are also other ways the state actually supplements their consumption through PDS and other things. So this gives them that choice, right? That is the point that I want to make. So I would only be doing this more descriptively today, but I am working on it, and probably I'll be able to make this point more rigorously. And obviously, when I make some points, I'll be making with some limitations. But then I would like to make it more robust as I work on this paper. So now I summarized and probably I gave out. I mean, I finished my talk, but nonetheless, let me walk you through what more concretely with the help of the data. So if you look at, that's the reason. That's what I was telling is actually in the first. We didn't pay much attention to the old age and the old age issues are the the social security, all of this, because even now our the proportion of the population who are old 60 plus 60 and 60 plus is roughly about 11%. Uh, uh, older people. Oh, this is only for the older people. That's in the millions, and then because it's rural and urban, so that's one. Okay, I think there's yeah. The other side of the graph is missing, but that's roughly that is the point. And then you can look at actually this is more informative actually, and this is not uniform across the states. Some states have, for example, Bihar, where the fertility rates are still very high as compared to southern Indian states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, even Telangana, Andhra Pradesh. Here, this is actually projection from the technical committee from the Ministry of Family and Welfare. So, which is done a population projection. We don't have a census of a recent period, so they have done a projections based on the previous census between 2021 and 2036. So these are this is how it looks like, and the 20% of Kerala's population as of now is 16.5%, and it's going to go up to 20%. And obviously that means there's a string. They're going to, because the fertility rate is not very high, so that means they're going to be more burden of older. I shouldn't be calling burden, but that's going to be a issue that needs to be addressed. You need to keep in adequate measures in place so as to help the people live a dignified life at a later age. So then obviously there are differences. Southern states are much higher, going to have much higher, about 20% as compared to, let's say, even 2000. Bihar would be where we are today in 2010. Where India was in 2010 or 11, all right? So even in 2036. So there are differences. It's not that it's going to be uniform. There are differences, but nonetheless, the point is we are actually aging. As I said, aging before before we become rich, and that's we should actually pay attention how we can provide a dignified life to people, and we should actually start thinking seriously about it. At a policy level and also in a practical measures out of that policy. So the thing is, as I said, so it's important to look at why actually we need a universal pension, or what is, as I said in the beginning, that actually most of the people don't have choice. So that would be evident from if you look at their employment conditions. And you see that obviously, as any other country in India, also as you age, they live across different rural and urban, male, female, and actually there is with the age people start after 60s, especially people start their level force starts declining sharply, especially after 65 it declines even sharper. So that's well-known fact, but that's then if you look at actually
labor use in agriculture, it is not the situation assessment surveys, it's only the CCPC surveys, the cost of cultivation surveys, and they do not report gender disaggregated data. So they collect total family labor days used in crop production by crop, but the gender disaggregation is not available, at least in public. So we tried to calculate that what is the share of women's labor in crop production, and for these 4 villages. So first look at the last column, which is the women's share of family labor in crop production. It's about 1/3, except for the village of Western UP, which is somewhat different from the others. It's a sugarcane growing village. There's much more male labor use. There's also contract labor, a bit of migrant labor as well. But it's about 1/3 of family labor. And if you take all labor, so whether it's family labor or hired labor, in Tamil Nadu, which the rice growing villages, it's 60%. So when we say what is the contribution of women to crop production in India, it's 60% of the labor that is going in. And in UP, it's a little less, by Mahatwar and Balia. Mahatwar is a bit misleading. We'll come to that later. It's 40%, but Mahatwar is a village where there's agriculture is not very highly productive, and there's also many of the men are migrating for non-agricultural employment. So I think that if you are looking at gross value added in crop production or any indicators, of course, women are not getting that share, but they're accounting for, between 30 to 60% roughly of women's labor in crop production. The next thing we've tried to do, and there's only one small estimate of similar kind that has been done, I think, by Srishti Yadav, who published the Review of Agrarian Studies a few years ago, is what are the extent of women's labor in livestock rearing and what are the returns to women. Now, we have found in many studies, one of my PhD students, Vijayamba, worked on this, that where animal rearing, particularly milch cattle and poultry, are family-based, so not dairy units, but family-based, invariably women are engaged in animal rearing labor. Cleaning the shed, milking the cow, many times also marketing. Sometimes the marketing may be by women, but the feeding, the cleaning, the bathing, the milking, you can assume roughly about 2 hours a day. So we've taken these 4 villages again. I don't know if you have a table. Yeah, we've taken these 4 villages again, and we've looked at the UP villages. There are many more milch animals than in the Tamil Nadu villages. And we've taken all households which had milch animal. We've looked at the women workers in those households. Arindam has, I should add, done all the calculations. And then we've looked at what is the income from livestock rearing and tried to work out what are the returns to women's labor day. And if we take an 8-hour labor day, we can make changes and we can reduce that. But women's earning from labor days roughly is coming to, except this one village, 100 rupees a day. And this is at current prices, right? 24, 25 prices. So in today's prices, 100 rupees a day is, the women, of course, not getting this in their hand necessarily. The livestock income may be used by others. This is the implicit income per woman worker in livestock. And the daily casual labor rate the same year, 2025, June, I think this is the data, is anything, it's lower, a little lower UP than in Tamil Nadu. So, let's say 20 to 300 rupees a day is the casual daily labor rate, and the livestock returns on livestock rearing is 100 rupees. So I think this, we're all saying women are underpaid, unpaid, and the wage gap is something that is talked about. We have wage data, but we don't have data on this activity, which is probably one of the important under self-employed, these women who are engaged in self-employment. And we'll try and do this for some other sericulture and fisheries and things in the future, because I think you need to look at this. Now, Palakurchi has the least amount of cattle, so we'll work this out as to the ratio is looking a bit better. So about otherwise 40%, the returns to livestock labor are only 40% of the returns daily wage labor. The last point that we want to make is looking at women in wage labor. This has already been discussed in some of the earlier sessions, that women's contribution to wage labor, to hired labor particularly, is quite high, both from manual worker and poor peasant families. So again, we've looked at, in this case, what we've done is we've looked at all the laboring out, that is working for wage, reported by households in our surveys. And then we've looked at the share of women workers in that. So if you take the, and it's only one village, as I said, the village of Western UP, where there's some amount of bringing in, and not much bringing in, of workers from outside. Otherwise, these villages are not hiring labor from outside. So we've done a census of the village. We are capturing, in a sense, the village labor market over here. And here, this is actually my, I think, last data slide, is that in the 2 villages of Tamil Nadu, it's about 1/3. 1/3 of the total wage labor that is performed in agriculture in the village is contributed by women. They also contribute 1/3 of the family labor, about 1/3 of the crop production. And as I said, this village, this is a little, it's not 70% is a bit of an anomaly because there's only one crop grown. Most of the men are migrating for non-agriculture. The absolute days of employment are very low. So the ratio of 70 is, let's ignore that for now. And as I said, in the sugarcane and rice wheat village of Western UP, there are many more men engaged in sugarcane harvest and so on. So the women's share is a little less. And the last one is that of this total labor in the casual labor market, as we can see, except for again the Eastern UP village, the share contributed by manual worker households is half or a little more than half. And so there are people from other classes who are contributing to wage. So let me conclude by saying that our finding from the Pari village studies that we've examined so far, and we want to extend this to all the villages that we've done. We didn't have time before the conference, is that women's labor makes a significant contribution, about 1/3 of crop production. So we're saying that, 1/3 of crop incomes, if the women were fairly paid and justly paid, 1/3 of crop incomes would be the share of women's income. Because as you all know, in the income data, we don't have any gender disaggregation. It's household income data, whatever little we have of it in India. But perhaps this is something we can use. Then even we come to the livestock labor, which is very, very important for women. It's very important part of self-employment activities. The returns to livestock labor are really pathetic. And the last one is, of course, that as men are seeking work outside, it's not surprising that there are more women engaged both on their own crop production and in wage labor in rural areas. Oh, okay. Oh, I left out some slides. I think we've done all this. People know about the wage gap that we've talked about. This is from our villages. Just a point which has come up before, but it's worth mentioning that in areas of higher women's participation and higher absolute wage rates, the wage gap is higher. This has been shown by Arindam Das with the official statistics as well. And we find it the same, that where in UP, both the men and women are getting about 250, 270 rupees a day. So the wage is low in absolute terms, and the ratio is, gender gap is not so high. But in Tamil Nadu, other states where the men are getting much higher, women are also getting higher, but the gender wage gap is high. Okay. There's a calculation that was mentioned earlier, and we've tried to do this also, that if you have families dependent on women, and even with migrant families, I think this is, I'm just putting it out as perhaps a research issue for research agenda, that the remittances may not be regular. So if the family in the village is dependent on women's earnings, and they don't get regular remittances from the men who have migrated, then at the kind of wage rates that we have, the kind of returns that we have to livestock labor, it's really going to be very difficult for these households to meet the minimum basic needs. Okay, I've already said this, that women's contribution is significant. We don't have official statistics that can be used on this. Women's work is very central to livestock rearing, is very, very underpaid and very low returns. And women's contribution to wage labor is also quite significant, though varying regionally, varying depending on cropping pattern, varying depending upon the extent of male migration. And again, the demand for women's better work wages for women is also obviously increasingly important as more and more men migrate and women are holding up agriculture. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, thanks for the opportunity to discuss these two papers. I was quite disappointed that the third paper in the session, which was also going to talk about women's work, could not make it because I think that would have really rounded up the session in a nice way. But I'll keep my remarks short. I think even though the two papers were dealing with quite disparate topics, there's one sort of fundamental thread that runs through it, which is of values. And what is it that we as a society value? And how does that sort of define our commitments to various sections of the society? So the first is Bheemeshwar's paper, which is essentially about valuing the elderly. And this is something that I think several people, genres including, have pointed out multiple times. This curiosity that old age of all forms of identity, it is a form of identity that all of us will inevitably inhabit and will inevitably experience, and yet our society undervalues care for the elderly and prioritizing the elderly's health and well-being to a really ridiculous degree. The fact that we're still paying pensions of 200 rupees a month, I mean, it's really egregious. So what does that say about our values in terms of our obligation as a society to the elderly? And I think this makes a broader point about sort of social protection coverage across the life cycle. I think if one looks at social protection within the Indian context, the bulk of our social protection tends to focus on early life. So we focus on women as producers of that early life. And so, Anganwadi services delivered to pregnant and lactating women. And then there's a bulk of services that are delivered to children. There are, of course, some programs like the PDS that sort of span the life cycle, but a really big sort of glaring gap in our social protection is that old age piece. And I think it's a very timely study for us to, I think we're still sort of in our minds in that phase where we are reaping the demographic dividend. We still have a young population. This is not our problem. But as Bheemeshwar very rightly pointed out, this is fast going to become our problem. And so what is it that we value as a society in terms of taking care of the elderly and particularly elderly women? And because Bheemeshwar mentioned that this is a common problem for both India and China, I will just say I was in China a couple of weeks ago, and one thing that's really evident when you're in even large cities like Beijing is sort of this endless focus on the elderly. Announcements in the metro will say, please take care of children and the elderly. You'll have parks where there'll be dedicated sections that are assigned to elderly exercise and elderly recreational activities. So the contrast is quite stark in that sense. The second set of values that Madhura's paper talks about quite deeply is valuing women. And I think there are two components within that your paper touched on really nicely. The first is valuing caregiving and valuing domestic work. And I think the issue of time use, I'm always curious about why we have not done a better job of measuring time use. Even the time use survey data that we have, as you point out, it's a single point in time. IFPRI, for example, has collected a wealth of time use data within the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture surveys. But again, that's a 24-hour period preceding the survey. And so the point about how women's time use varies across the agricultural cycle and across seasons is a really important one. The thing I would add to that is a question of time use agency. So I think if we think that few surveys measure actual time use, even fewer surveys measure your agency or your ability to choose how you use your time. So the fact that I'm busy or the fact that I'm not busy is only one dimension of what we think of as agency and empowerment in this context. If I choose to be busy or I choose to be not busy, exercising that level of control over how I decide to spend my day or to use my time. I think for future measurement exercises, measuring both the components of time use as well as your ability to exercise choice over how you are using the days, the time use agency component, I think is a really important component. The third part of this values, which comes under sort of valuing women, is valuing women's work. And Madhura talked about that quite nicely in that comparison of the Pari villages. And I think there are sort of two aspects to this. One is, of course, being able to measure women's work accurately in order to be able to as you put in, to say, you know, this is women's contribution to primary production, to livestock rearing, to various forms of casual labor within agriculture. And I'll just make the point that as we see sort of structural transformation within agriculture, there are going to be different components of the agri-food systems that are going to become more important. So you tend to see that as, if you just take a global perspective, as countries quote unquote develop, you're seeing a fall, of course, in labor employed in agricultural and allied activities overall. But within that, you are seeing also a fall in the importance of primary production. So you see a rise in the share of employment relatively in things like, trade and transport, word processing and marketing, so the value add component of agri-food systems. You're also seeing a rise in the contribution of those post primary production sectors to value add. So as economies quote unquote develop, we're going to see that midstream set of activities that relate to processing, to marketing, to retail, to hospitality, all of that is going to grow both in terms of its contribution to employment as well as its contribution to value added. And a recent paper in, I think it was Nature Food, Chris Barrett and co-authors show that actually what you're seeing, Madhura talked about the gender wage gap within, in a sense, primary production, but you also see this kind of gender-based occupational sorting into those midstream agri-food systems activities. So even while everybody is potentially getting better off in terms of higher incomes when they move out of primary production into midstream agri-food activities, you tend to find that women sort into the lower paying midstream activities. So processing, especially small scale informal processing, you also see them working more in retail and hospitality, whereas men tend to migrate more to jobs like manufacturing, trade and transport. And the average incomes of those two midstream sectors are quite different. And so we're looking at a scenario where that gender wage gap is actually going to continue to increase. So I don't feel like we're talking enough about valuing women's work along the entire value chains, not just in primary production and all of its components within livestock and then casual labor, but also as we face a future where fewer and fewer people will be engaged in primary production, but more in that midstream agri-food systems. What are we also doing to kind of lower the gender gap in those and sort of improve women's empowerment there? And the last point I make, which has been touched upon in multiple presentations that also came out here, is really unpacking this concept of self-employment, right? And often self-employment and entrepreneurship, when we think of entrepreneurs, I think we all have something in our mind which is very different from kind of the distress-based informal self-employment that is actually being seen in rural economies. And so even in our work in Bangladesh and the Philippines, but also in India, we find that, that entrepreneurship or self-employment component, of course, has two extremes. So you have the privileged, high-end, high-value self-employment, which has high incomes. It's often people who can afford to take risks and start their own businesses. But then the large component that we're often not talking enough about is the kind of informal self-employment. You grow potatoes, the woman is then slicing and frying the potatoes and selling them on the side of the road, right? So that's counting as self-employment. It's often coming out of a space of needing to supplement household income. It's low paid, it's low valued, and women often exhibit low control and agency even over the incomes that they earn from that. So I think overall, if I had to sort of pick a thread that combined the two papers and possibly also the third, we haven't been able to see that, it really is on values. So valuing the elderly, valuing women, and within valuing women, both being able to accurately measure their participation and then being accurately able to measure their time use and their control and agency over the way they use their time. So thank you for the opportunity. I let people ask questions.
Now the floor is open. Anybody like to? Yes. Would you like to understand?
Thank you, Bheem and Madhura, for your presentation. I'll have this, a few things, or maybe Madhura can respond to. One is the methodological, which I think Arindam will be better person to respond. When we talk about these earnings and the wages and earnings from the animal husbandry work, are they standardized 8-hour work for the animal husbandry also? Because what Madhura showed is there's a relatively shorter amount of time that they invest in animal care. And how do you also factor in are these the self-consumed animal products like milk or something, or is it the sale that the households are doing and earning? And is there a way to also factor in when households are raising calves as bovines and selling them as adult animals? That is an accumulation and value added over a couple of years. So does that also get calculated in the earnings of the women or the households? And when you were discussing about the work hours by women and earnings from agriculture wages and this thing, does this include, or the time used, does it include only the peasant and the rural wage laboring households, or all households of the villages from these 4 villages? That's yeah, I think that's it. And from Veem, I wanted to just ask, you showed the pensions for old age, people from across different states, and Haryana has been one of the highest paying, pension paying states from many decades, and I think one of the states which started or pioneered the old age pension. Yeah, and it has played a huge role. Okay, I mean, one of the states which actually had a huge influence in terms of political. Okay, so let's go. I stand corrected with that. But Haryana has been also a state which has, for long, have been, paying quite high, old age pension. So, is there a story that explains in terms of work participation and how that gets factored into people not working after particular ages? Is there a statewide story to that? I mean, you showed the graph, but if there is something that can say a little more about that. Thank you.
One thing I have to bring your notice that in the women work in the agriculture in the planting season and cutting season is very notable. In the planting season, as a hired labor, she has to work more than 14 hours per day. Morning for one field, soon after another field, soon after another field. These 3 shifts she is working in the planting season. That is also by doing this work for continuously 14 hours per day. It is minimum, and also cutting season also. And women entered new arena of agricultural activities. The 25 years ago, spraying pesticide is not considered as a women work. Now it is almost all done by women only now. And spraying fertilizer also doing by women now. And also this material like that, that activities was not considered the women's work before. But now we called as in Kannada coal gundali. This like this is plucking. Maybe English word I did not know. I will show image. That work as now doing by women. So women entered almost all agricultural activities except fluffing. Fluffing is not done by women now. In some cases, rarely. Even say in driving tractor like that, that is also there, but it is a rare thing. And driving motorcycle is also, but rare thing, not common thing. But women, since from this after the 2000s, after 2000, women entered all the activities of the agriculture. That is happening now. One thing. Another one thing regarding to add the old age pension. In rural area, the minimum bribe for sanctioning the old age pension is 5,000 rupees. It is hardly 600, 700, 800 per month. If after 2 years, then it will be cleared for loan, they met for the sanctioning, suddenly they stop pension for taking another type of another bribe because they stopped because of their because you see in Karnataka the budget amount whatever they kept in the budget, that is to be the maximum cap on the number of beneficiary. If number of beneficiary exceeds the seniority and the whoever who get 1 or 2 year continuously, they will be stopped. Then they were going to Tahsildar office and bribe again and thanks and again. This is the routine work. In some cases, the whatever amount they received as a wage, old age pension, all together goes to bribe. This has to be. You may cover it. It is sensitive also. Thank you. Thank you. My language is the problem.
I just see this was of those villages which have been surveyed, Madhura. So we understand that data is coming from that. But there is another thing regarding this wage. Many a times we find that basically these casual workers, manual workers, or seasonal workers are the ones who have taken a lot of loan, advance loan from the contractor who will employ them. So actually for that period, they don't get any money at all because that advance loan is already over. So how one should, because what is that percentage of people? Because from our experience at the ground level, that is growing in numbers. That is, and then it is like a bonded labor. They have to go back to that contractor to work, irrespective of whatever wage he is giving. So, how that should be interesting to be factored in sometime later.
Right. I think it's a very serious issue. I think honestly, I think you don't know.
Switch off.
Because we don't require it anymore. Yeah. No, this bribe at every level of pension, is there. And it's that's it. It's nobody bats an eyelid about it. It's understood and paid. And as he says, it may be true. Look, the bribe you pay to get enrolled, maybe as much as the pension for the next 2-3 years. Okay. So I think this is something. While we only look at the official numbers, what happens at the ground level? I'm sure many of us have our own private stories to tell, but I think it's important. Corruption at the bottom of the system is very
So I think the point being made about universal pension is very important because if you have a list that only X% can be given, then you're going to have many more, this problem of how to stay on that list and keep bribing to stay on the list. So I think that's excellent, the demand that you made. The other thing I just wanted to point out that there have been some studies earlier, like Marty Chen on widows, which have talked about widows, a little bit about widowers, that how, having some, and I think there are some studies in Kerala also done, that having that little pension, even if it is 1,000, the family is ready to accept you rather than throw you out. So I think there's a literature on that which you may want to look at.
Yeah, sure.
So this corruption, this may not be uniform, and but there are a lot of factors play a role. Definitely, there's an amount because first of all, as Professor Madhura said, actually it's not universal. The moment you make it targeting, so there are also the other issue that actually Professor Madhura has written earlier of 2 years, 2 years of targeting. The target errors of those who are not supposed to be from the BPL. These are meant basically for the BPL family, as if now, from the government of India. But the thing is, it's most likely that especially in the rural areas, from my own preliminary observation from the village I am from, and then other villages that I've been to, is that actually among the beneficiaries, you see that a substantial section of the population, older population, who are actually not from the BPL families. So that is again errors of targeting when you have that bound to happen, and obviously because of the power structures and the people and those who cannot exercise that political power, and then obviously they have to bribe and try to get into these things. And also there is time to time, and there's also cap that actually central government imposes on how much state can actually dole out this pensions. So there is actually not only that actually that is 200 rupees that they have restricted to, but also it dictates how much each state can give a pension, old age pension under the old age social security pension. So that's also another aspect because that's part of the targeting. The other issue about Shamsher, actually, you're true that actually Haryana pays a much higher amount. I mean, it pays about 3,000 rupees, and now earlier it is one of the highest payer in terms of amount that each beneficiary receives. Now Telangana, Andhra pay about 4,000 rupees. But then another thing that we need to also take into the consideration is that not only that actually the states restrict themselves to the amount, both amounts also topped up, but at the other side, states often also give to more than what central dictates or what central gives as a 200 rupees. It also gives a larger section of older population these pensions. And a good thing about it is actually it makes to political campaigns. It's just whether it not only women issues that have been, for example, Maharashtra, other places, the cash transfers to women, but also especially in growing up in Telangana, Andhra, I've seen since 2004, 5 onwards. Actually, this has become one of the major political the part of the manifestos, part of the election fights, and then so every election since 2004, every election, subsequent election, these elections have guaranteed that actually the pensions are updated. So the recent outcome in Telangana, for example, and in Andhra, that every election actually there is a promise that we increase the old age pension by 1,000 or 1,500. So the recent increase is an outcome of last election, which has happened 1 year back. Despite that the states are under tremendous, individual states are under tremendous fiscal burden, they cannot actually buck this question. They cannot escape this responsibility because now this is, I think, there's a proper 20. Their numbers are growing. So their bargaining power is increases. So another thing about the work and the pension related issues. So there are studies in India which actually looked at this about whether pension would actually make people supply less labor in the old age. But I think that is I'm not in line with that because I think we are not in a country where there is a deficit of labor supply. Rather, what we have a problem is that actually huge underemployment, which reflects in unpaid family labor, and also bulk of a woman, even by the definition of it, or even the relaxing the definition recently, that about 60% of women still in the prime age are not working. So why are we actually dependent on the old population? Why should we be worried? As always, this is the thing that, this is typically in the labor economics that always, you increase the pension, or if there's a pension, people will slack and they won't work. They don't have to work. You give them a chance. Even if you give the pension, those who want to work, they would anyway continue to work. But most of the results have shown that actually there is no, even with the pension, not many people actually withdrawn from the labor force. So that means there is a choice that they are making. And So this would also complement in several ways to their deteriorating health, meeting the the requirement for medicine, other related materials. So that's the thing that I wanted to share.
So about the return from animal husbandry. So what we have done, so we do not have labor absorption in animal husbandry. So data on labor absorption in animal husbandry. What we have basically, if women engaged in animal husbandry, we have data, work participation data or the occupations data. So the value is basically implicit, imputed value. So what we have done basically, number of women engaged in animal husbandry in the households into, and we assume that 2 hours in a day that they spend for animal husbandry into total number of animals in the households. Basically, we have taken calf, milch animal, and the bullock. So we calculated total number of days they spent in a year. So multiplied by 365 days, divided by 8 hours. So we have standardized in 8 hours. And then this is the total number of days that in the village the women spend for animal husbandry. And we have total returns from animal husbandry. So we have divided total returns from animal husbandry divided by number of days that they have in the village they spend. So we got this return, like now the average days of return per woman in the village. That is what we have done. Sorry. No. So if they have when they sold mid of the year, we have taken appreciation value and mid of the appreciation value. Like if they suppose the animal they kept only for the half of the year, so this is the appreciation value for the calf for half of the year, like divided into 12 into 6, basically divided by 12 into 6. That is what we have done for this calculation. So appreciation value for calf, not.
I have a question, though not exactly related to women contribution to agriculture, but actually I was talking to Professor Nagaraj yesterday, and I've been a little puzzled for some time about the increase in the milk production in India. And even Professor Nagaraj pointed out after that, actually, I had a chat with him about that. Actually, somehow, this is my gut feeling, and it is not very convincing that actually the livestock milk, especially the milk production from livestock, actually gone up substantially. Now we both in terms of per capita, we have reached almost half a kg for a person per day, and also in terms of numbers, more than 243 or 240 roughly about that figure million tons per year. So this is happening in a period where actually drought animals have been completely removed, even in states like semi-arid areas in Telangana, which is now, of course, there's irrigation that has been brought in big way recently. But then even in those areas, actually complete agricultural operations have been mechanized. Even the smallest farmer from the village, I come from one of the most backward districts of Telangana, Nagar. In recent visits to my ancestral village, shows that actually nobody, even a person who owns half acre of land, does not use draught animal anymore. And one of the problems that we used to have in my village is that actually the draught animal used to be left loose, and they used to graze in other people's land, and that used to lead to a lot of conflicts. But then that have actually completely disappeared, and you don't find any appeal. And what if you find some people having few buffaloes, and the people over time, those who actually moved out of agriculture, they've also actually stopped even the bovine livestock. So then if this increase in the milk production is happening at a period when the overall livestock is declining for the agricultural use for the drought, because there is also made sense. It also made sense that if you had drought animal, you also had animals for milk cows, along with them your calves, all of that. But then it is also declining. Then is that something is happening that people now shifted away from crop husbandry to animal husbandry? That's the one. Or the second thing, a second possibility one can attribute to is artificial insemination of making the productivity increase. is that even that is, did we spend so much money? Because both people, those are from me. So that's what I want to ask from why, especially why I'm asking this question is you have studied these two villages in UP, Madhura, and I don't know what is the profile of those villages, but did you find any decrease or increase in the livestock holdings in these two villages? That's what. So I'm yeah.
Another topic, but anyway. So first, let me just very quickly think and then come back to Kalyani that if you look at our Tamil Nadu book, we have looked at documented the change and the livestock censuses of India. There's a paper on livestock there. Also document the change. There's no question that bullock have declined all over India and there's mechanization. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a change and there's actually buffalo. Milch buffalo has increased in very big ways. I think that we have to look at the latest livestock holding numbers. The composition of livestock has changed. So I think that's very clear, but not necessarily showing that milk production is not increased. We can look at the relative numbers on it. So to come to, I think, Kalyani, thank you for your points. Agency is very important. And in fact, I find these women empowerment indices and all a little, calling it empowerment is really going too far. So we are not even going there. But women, the understanding earlier is that women participating in the workforce gives them certain income, gives them certain status, so gives them some bargaining power. But when that labor is unpaid, home-based, delayed payment, should we question that assumption that women entering the workforce is giving them additional agency? I think that's something that we need to look at. The other point you made, and I think maybe we'll take it up in the last session, is that as the range of activities and processing and so on is increasing, we have to look at the women's role and wage gaps or earnings gap, not just in crop production and livestock rearing production sector, but the post-harvest marketing and so on. And penny trade, and though there is some work from the official statistics like P.C. Mohanan has been writing on unorganized manufacturing and what is the women's earnings and women's role. And in rural areas, the biggest unorganized manufacturing activity is customized tailoring. That's running a little sewing machine and tailoring is an unorganized manufacturing sector which has grown rapidly. So we need to do that. And the last point I want to make is that I think, Yashwanta, what you said about, and I think this is something that we need to discuss among those working in labor statistics and measuring work, is that like a 2-hour day, say, if you have one animal, it's only a 2-hour day, then we multiply it by 365, because you have to look after the animal every day, and divide it by 8 hours. On the other hand, during the peak season, 12-hour days, 14-hour days, or even women when they do weeding for 7 hours, which is so labor intensive, we should just call that the working day. We're stuck to the 8-hour working day, so we used to reduce it. Because actually then, they get 3 days or 4 days, they're working 14 hours, and the rest of the calendar days, they have nothing to do. So I don't know, I've been thinking about this, and I think some of us in Pari also thinking about, looking at the intensity of work. How do we look at, do we just take a standard 8-hour day, or do we need to think differently about, it's very hard, labor. Do we really have to stick to that standard? But this is again just opening the floor for future discussions.
Did you observe that there is there an increase in the livestock stock?
So in Tamil Nadu, the livestock holdings, I can't remember the UP 2006 and 23 number, but the Tamil Nadu village, there is an overall increase, but it's gone from bullocks to buffaloes and poultry. So the composition of livestock has changed, and this corresponds to what the livestock census of India says.
Yes. Okay, then we bring this session to a close. Thank you, Bheem. Thank you, and thank you for your comments. So I think we had a nice, very wonderful session. So I think we had a very useful, productive session. So we bring this session to a close. Thank you very much.